woke up in the in the early hours of this morning. As usual, I asked Siri what the time was, and it was just gone 5 o'clock, 5 a.m. And the last several nights, I've been waking up and those usually between 4 and 5 o'clock, feeling very tired, and I did so again today. I thought it's now just gone 7 o'clock, 7:15, so I've kind of been laying in bed for a long while, trying to get back to sleep. I found myself getting really worked up and a bit, perhaps a little bit angry or frustrated. I found myself in a little bit of a mental sort of cycle of thoughts about unable to explain myself and my feeling of being unwell, and recently I spoke to the doctor. It was just a sort of general. I've been seen a doctor more recently, and I think each time I fail to try and explain myself and be accurate about how I'm feeling, it feels almost like I don't know if trauma is the right word. It may be. There's a sense of sort of overwhelm and anguish, and now starting to be sort of frustration and anger. And I think a good word to use is strain. It's something I was thinking about while I was in bed. The strain to try and explain myself. It's even with the question the doctor may ask, how are you doing? It's just almost overwhelming. And what perhaps made it more difficult was it was a phone call, and I struggle on the phone, and there's almost no preparation for that conversation. So it's kind of answering the phone, thinking it may be the doctor, but but there's no, and that's something that's it's a bigger deal than it seems, or it's bigger deal than it seems, because on the outside it can feel like. So I think even the doctor acknowledged that, I think eventually it was said that, you struggle on the phone, but of course they're not in my mind and body, so I didn't realise how impactful not just struggling on the phone but having that conversation is. And it's very very upsetting and very I guess I use the word trauma because it kind of leaves a trace or a knot, or it adds to the other sort of traumatic times when I've not been able to explain myself. So it's not just that one incident. It kind of like having an injury or a cut, and it's like prodding that cut, and it's like so it's quite so perhaps that explains the reaction in the early hours this morning, and something I want to try and share with the doctor as well, the strain of, it's a catch-22 because it's at the moment it's me that it's almost me that is making the monthly appointments to check in with the doctor. So it's kind of me doing that, but I guess I'm doing that because my health is sort of deteriorating, it seems, and it feels like I need some extra support or some reassurance. But at the moment it seems like there's a price for that reassurance. And going back to the telephone appointment, sort of impromptu appointment, I was trying to explain about the dissociation becoming more severe, and I don't think anything was said about it, and I don't mean that in a judgment, but I don't think that perhaps there isn't much that can be said about it besides sort of an empathetic response or sympathetic response of saying, and I don't think that's the doctor's job. I'm not sure. Well, yeah, or I haven't really received, not that I'm looking for it from the doctor at all. But yeah, I don't remember anything being said about it. Like, I didn't feel ignored. I felt like the doctor was just sort of getting on with the appointment. But I didn't feel like that was addressed. When I mentioned some other symptoms about me having lightheadedness after I blow my nose, I feel really lightheaded, and I said to the doctor, I'm not sure if this is important or relevant, but I thought I'd mention it just in case that when I do that I feel lightheaded, or when I'm crouched down for a while, if my laptop's on this very small desk above my floor, I kind of prop it up on a mini table, so sometimes I'm crouched down, sort of putting on some music or a video or something, or logging in even when I load it up, and if I'm there for a little bit of time, when I stand up I feel like I'm quite lightheaded. So I thought it would be best for me to share that with them, even at the risk of sort of sharing something that's not relevant or not as important or nothing to worry about. Starting to feel, I think I'm feeling a bit of chest pain, so I may take that. I don't know if that anxiety medication may help. I think it's just because I'm a bit worked up, I think. And again, I found myself sort of thinking about those people who kind of physically act out their frustration or anger, or I think I mentioned it in a previous vlog of patients who sort of become aggressive or become physically sort of destructive around their sort of area of maybe hitting something, or and I felt that in me, which was a bit something I mentioned to the doctor, but it's all a bit triggering just thinking about the doctor at the moment, appointments, because it feels like it's just another frustration, another suffocation, another failed attempt to try and explain things. There has been times where I've written stuff down, which does help a little bit, because it kind of it takes the pressure off me to memorize and try and explain. And obviously what I write down is limited. I can't write 2 pages of A5 and read that out verbatim to the doctor, but I usually just do bullet points of things. like I may put, severe dissociation, and then kind of try and elaborate on that, but that helps a little bit. But, and it sounds silly, but it feels like I forget so many things. Like me mentioning this, things feel so severe that it just feels like it will just get lost in the waves a little bit. It's like dropping some water in the ocean and trying to find it. It's already gone. It's already blended in. So yeah, I felt that element of frustration where those who can't express themselves with words or are filled with frustration, they need to express something, they need to get it out, and the only way for them to do it is to sort of physically, whether it is, sort of being destructive in the environment, hitting something, smashing something, or I feel like I'm almost there in some ways, where I just, one day I'm just going to just kind of have my head in my hands. Don't know what the reaction would be, but it's going to be some sort of reaction that will tell the person that that I'm not dealing with this, I can't deal with this, or I'm not able to answer your questions. And this is the response that it's having on me, whether it's like my head in my hands, or I can kind of envision that of me just maybe becoming mute a bit, or becoming just completely closed down, because I don't think I'd be, well, I guess if I was really worked up, I don't know, I can't see myself. Sounds silly to say this, but I can't see myself, hitting or smashing something. I feel like I'd be too self-conscious and embarrassed to draw attention to myself. But I think all I do is probably just like sort of curl up into a ball and sort of, not be responsive and not able to respond. And that itself will be a similar sort of communication that, okay, this guy's, and if you saw someone in that state, it's easy to sense that he's under a great deal of strain. Use that word again. So that's something I may try and write down after this vlog in my notebook, and hopefully I'll remember to show that to the doctor or read it to the doctor. Just what I remember as well, I got some news about the autism assessment stuff that I did. I think it was maybe at the beginning of this year. I think I did that. We're in December now, and what's happened is that I moved doctor surgeries in, and I was afraid this may happen. I moved doctor surgeries probably some months ago. And I'm not sure what happened, but basically my autism assessment case has been closed. They requested, my doctor just told me yesterday that they received, that I think in May they had requested some more information, and I wasn't told about that at all. I think in May I may have still been registered to my old surgery, I don't know. I'm not sure. But one way or the other, I didn't receive any sort of communication about that. And it's been closed, so, and part of me wanted to be a bit frustrated and angry. Part of me, I guess, is frustrated and angry, because it feels like I needed that assessment. The more I can try and understand about my health, the more sort of, it will help my sanity to do that. So now with this delay, and this sort of I don't know the communication processes of the autism stuff. So whether the doctor, were they supposed to call me to say, yes, we received this back and we need more information on this, but I wasn't sort of told about it, and and I didn't receive any letters or anything, because it was registered to I still have my dad's address on the old surgery, so I would have been told about any letters I'd received. So I don't know what happened with that, really. And perhaps, to be fair, with all, there's mistakes can easily happen. In the system, there's always going to be faults. Maybe a letter was supposed to be sent out and it didn't get sent out, or I got lost in the system where a phone call was supposed to be made, and so I can try and be understanding of that. Nothing is perfect. Mistakes happen. It's part of life. So I was kind of, when I was given that news, I was a little bit upset and frustrated, but I was also, there was some understanding there to think, okay, well, that's just life. What can you do? And so I'm going to restart the sort of process again with the doctor I'm with, and that involves answering questions and trying to give information about symptoms, which is going to be, again, a strain, really strenuous to do. I've been given a set of questions that I've kind of roughly jotted down in my scroll that I can't really read anymore, but I researched online sort of pre-assessment questions with the doctor, and it's given me a rough idea of what to write. Well, not really. It's given me some subject matter of what to write, but I think the effort to write it's going to be another. It's going to be really, really difficult to do. And doing it, I think it's going to make me more frustrated and angry, because in the doing of it, it's almost, I'm trying to do something. Let's use an example. It's like I have trouble walking, but I have to walk to kind of get help, almost. I don't know if that's quite accurate, if that's right, but it's almost similar to that, I guess, because my mind feels like the cognitive function is becoming more and more difficult, but I have to use that to try and say, yes, it is difficult, but it's a bit of a thing. And I wasn't able to say that to the doctor when they asked me about it, and I think maybe there's some frustration, and again, with not being understood, and a big part of that is that because it's very hard for me to express and explain, and not even that, mental health, you could never be in someone else's shoes fully, in the sense of you know exactly how they're feeling, what they're going through, so that just makes it very difficult. I don't expect someone else to suddenly completely understand how I'm feeling or what I'm going through, but it feels like there's a huge gap, where there's not even a stepping stone for me to try and meet someone in the middle. And maybe that's just part of the lack of resources and availability for certain help, that I think that sort of doctor's appointments at 10 minutes, and it sometimes feels like a few minutes that you've got to cram everything in and say stuff, and it's just not doable. So I'm going to start the autism stuff all over again. I've got it instant coffee here, and that's something I need to. I feel I give myself the exception, especially today. Because this morning I thought, okay, let's, I've kind of, the coffee's crept in again, more days than I wanted to, and anything that can try and help sleep, I want to try and cut that out again. So, but this morning I just, So, I had all of those kind of thoughts marinating, going round and round. It's just causing more anguish and more unwellness. And I was getting kind of lost in the thoughts of that. So I was kind of losing the big picture, and I was just just feeling very unwell. And it's getting, so I kind of, it's strange. I don't know how to release that sort of anguish in me, besides sort of getting validation, and for someone like a doctor to say, I can really understand how that must feel, or have some sort of acknowledgement of understanding, and to be heard, and for me to try and maybe have space or the ability to explain stuff. But and when I mentioned, that sort of element of me sort of shutting down, or curling up into a ball and not being responsive, it's it's kind of a build-up of what's going on now, of the inability to explain, and perhaps also on the other side, the maybe either lack of resources, or having someone there to to have the time to try and to help me sort of explain or hear me out in that way. And I feel like I don't want it to get to that stage of me being completely shut down and mute, and maybe I'll jot this down as well. Maybe I'll take my notebook here, leave it on here, because maybe it's important for me to try and write it down, and not just share it here. But so it's getting to that point where things are building up, and what choice do I do but to have that sort of, I don't want it to get to that stage, because it feels like sometimes it's heading that way, where I'm kind of not able to, I'm struggling to kind of keep regular contact with a few of the friends I'm still in touch with, and I can imagine at some point, once you begin shutting down, that could increase, and especially to a couple of family members I'm in touch with, and I don't want to get to a stage where I'm kind of escorted to hospital, or at that point of needing lots of help, and I'm just so shut down in myself, because there's just no way to explain anymore. There's nothing left, no ability to do that, and it, I guess, leads back to the whole circle of stuff, really, where although I've been given this diagnosis of anxiety and depression, but it feels like it's more than that. And if I was to get to a very serious stage like that, then I don't know, maybe there'll be more done, I guess, more sort of investigated about, okay, maybe what else could it be? There's this as well, he's dealing with this. But even to talk about it, it's a bit over my head, because of course, the less I'm able to really try and sort of the less I can be clear about how things are with me. So so I'm really feeling the effects of all of sort of those thoughts I was having. And it's really strange, because those thoughts are kind of almost like they've got a gravitational pull, and you've got you're kind of in that sort of machine cycle of trying to figure out those thoughts. And it's difficult, because although I want to kind of step out of them and just try and be mindful, there's a sense of needing to make sense of those thoughts, because if I don't, it's another sort of erosion of the mind. That's what it feels like. Because each of the sort of narratives that are going through the mind, the less you understand of them, the more kind of insane it feels. It's like having the TV on, but now but hearing the voices go backwards, or seeing the scenes of a movie mixed up, and now you're trying to reverse that to get them straight again, the voices sounding as they should sound, so you can hear what's going on, or what's supposed to be said, and what's supposed to be understood. But to do that, it takes a great deal of strain and effort, and which makes, which sometimes amplifies stick to that metaphor of, it makes it more incoherent, the movie or the video playing. So it's a real, it's a strange process going on there. Sometimes I wish that I was able to kind of be clear with the doctor, or any sort of medical person. Stick with a doctor, I guess, because that's the only sort of medical, not really seeing universal credit at the moment. So, but if universal credit as well, but sometimes it feels like I'm not well enough to say, hey, I'm feeling very unwell. Like I try and give an explanation that's kind of lacking in clarity, and it probably does me a bit of a disservice to try and sort of explain. So maybe it's better for me to try and, not better, but perhaps it's more effective and accurate just to say, I'm just feeling too unwell to try and explain. I'm not sure where to begin. But I don't have that clarity in me. I feel sometimes I forget to say that almost. And I get into this sort of half sort of mumbling explanation that probably does me a disservice in regards to, being heard, or in that interaction with my health. If there's a question of about my health or seeing how I am. But yeah, almost. Yeah, I'm kind of. It feels like I'm in between the two sometimes, and it feels like that's the most ineffective place to be, where you're kind of sort of half given an explanation, and because you're explaining or talking, giving words, it can almost sense that, oh yeah, this person's probably okay, but he seems a bit unclear about a few things, and it's versus no, that's not it. Whereas if I was to give a bit more of an accurate explanation on that end of the spectrum, they could say, wow, okay, I can understand this guy's going through a lot. He's mentioned some of the key words, which I guess in the health industry, whether it's doctor or anyone else, like, I think without mentioning key words, sometimes it's very hard to kind of for someone to understand what you're going through. But when you're not fully able to give those words, and you're kind of giving sort of a half diluted explanation, then it can almost another word for disservice, belittles the symptoms and things you're going through. But and I think what's also difficult is that when I'm in those situations, I'm kind of, I don't know if dissociation is the right word. I know there's some sort of disconnection where, like now, me talking here, there's a bit more clarity and a little bit more space around the things I'm saying. So there's a chance, a very small capacity to sort of interpret and try and explain. Whereas I think if, in example, if there's a doctor's appointment, that space will be almost gone, and I'd kind of, whatever capacity I have at that time is the explanation that will be given. So it's kind of there'll be no way to improve that at the time. It will just be, okay, whatever I've got in that moment is what will be given. There wouldn't be a time to kind of just to the capacity to take a moment to say, okay, let's just think about this. No, it's not this, it's this or this, and re-clarify and sort of emphasize things, and add more detail, and I do feel a bit lost at LFC. This sort of analogy is mentioned as well, where I'm kind of unwell. I feel unwell, but it feels like I'm not unwell enough on that end of the spectrum to get certain help, or I'm too well to perhaps get certain help here. I'm kind of it feels like no man's land, really. That's what it kind of feels like. Like I'm unwell, so this end is probably the wellness spectrum, and I'm kind of caught between two sort of areas of I'm sort of independent in some respects, but it's a great struggle each day, and there's a kind of strain on my health. I'm on that feels like precipice of health, but until I fall down that sort of the other side, it's like I won't, when you're kind of more unwell, there's, I guess, more help in some ways. Doesn't feel quite accurate, or maybe more support. But I guess there's challenges with that as well, because to be on that end of the spectrum, most likely it could be sort of an inpatient, hospitalized, or in a facility. And I think and there's obviously a great deal of challenge with that as well, to and it feels like I'm too, not that I'm, it's all, yeah, it's all a bit muddled as well in my head, but try and explain things. But I guess if I was a bit more unwell than I am, things will be more defined. So instead of like a faint pencil, it'll be like a marker pen where, okay, there's some distinct lines here of degeneration, of unwellness, of cognitive function. But where I am now, it's like until, for example, I curl up in a ball and I'm unresponsive, or until I'm, completely isolating from people, or not eating and taking care of myself, or people notice that I'm just drastically becoming unwell, only then help and support will be easier to be given, because it's more defined and things are more defined. But I'm in this kind of no man's land where there's a great deal of severity, but there's no definition of that. It's in this kind of ocean of symptoms called depression and anxiety, which the spectrum of that's getting bigger and bigger, where on one end, it's probably fair to say most, if not all people at some point experience sort of symptoms. There's obviously 50, 100 symptoms, but they may have certain symptoms of depression and anxiety, or moments or periods of time, short periods, or situational depression, anxiety, but it feels like I'm just sort of lost in that at the moment. Like I'm not unwell enough to things to be defined in that sense. And this happens. I feel like the way I feel worked up and more unwell. This kind of feels like it's like a cycle, a little bit of a cycle. I don't know if cycle is the right word, but maybe a reaction, I guess, from doctor's appointments. It's something I wrote down and I shared, but it all just feels so meaningless, really. I think I shared this several appointments ago, that I find it really difficult to explain myself, but it feels like, that just can be easily forgotten. Like there's no weight to it. Like it feels like I need that to be said at every appointment, or every time there's an interaction almost, but I'm not able to do that. Or I need, the other person to remember that. And of course it's the amount of patients and people they see, and it's not realistic, or it's not reasonable, I guess, for that to happen. It would only be reasonable if I had like a private doctor who I saw every day, then that would be a reasonable expectation. But a doctor who I see once a month, it's not fair and not reasonable, but I feel that that's what I need for that to be remembered. So even though I'm repeating myself, but it feels like I need to, because I feel, maybe it's a bit of an OCD thing, but I feel like I need to kind of straighten out these thoughts that I'm having about my health, about trying to explain myself to, and the lack of capacity to do that, the failure to do that, and then the reaction that causes. Maybe I can write that down as well. I wonder if it's worth me writing it down now while I'm recording. Don't know if that would be weird. Sort of, maybe it's okay to do. No, I think I'll do it afterwards. Maybe good to wrap this up. We're 39 minutes, coming up to 40 minutes in. And hopefully this has helped a little bit to talk here and take some of the pressure off of those thoughts. And hopefully I can kind of sort of break from that cycle of stuff and just drop it for the moment. And I'm sure it will start to fade a bit as the distance from from having that doctor's appointment grows. I think things will hopefully settle down a bit more, but maybe it will take a day or two of, I don't know, feeling this way, but yeah, maybe I can just try to focus on recovering from the way I'm feeling now a little bit, the impact of this night, this early morning. Maybe writing some stuff down now. Maybe that'll be good. Well, it's sort of doesn't feel like anything's ever fresh in my head anymore, but as fresh as it can be, I guess, in regards to the thoughts I've been having. Yeah, and maybe there's a thought about maybe recording again later today, perhaps might be